Hello, and welcome to TGCon Live. This is our roundtable on keeping supplements safe amid regulatory vacuum, low stocks, and high demand. I have just a few housekeeping items to mention. I'm having a little trouble with the screen though, bear with me. Before we get into our topic, the few housekeeping items I wanted to mention are that we think you're going to have the best viewing experience if you click on theater mode. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is the chat function, which is next to the main screen. You can type in any questions that occur to you as we go through this discussion, and we'll get to just as many audience questions as we possibly can at the end of the presentation. The other tab next to chat is called poll, and that's where you can go to find any poll questions for either this session or other sessions that you attend throughout the day. If you have any audio or video problems, I would like to direct your attention up to the support tab. If you click on support and then click on get help, that's your best chance of having us help you triage any problems that you might be having. If you type those issues into the chat box, unfortunately, your help may be delayed. So use the support tab if you can. And finally, after the session, we have an after session survey that's going to be a link below this main presentation. And I would invite you to fill out that survey. We'd love to hear your feedback. My name's Dana Johnson Downing, and I'm the Director of Policy and Partnerships here at Trace Gains, and I'll be the roundtable monitor. I am thrilled to introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Larisa Pavlick. She's the VP of Global Regulatory and Compliance for the United Natural Products Alliance. UNPA is one of our partners, and we're thrilled to have Larisa join us. Next is Mike Finamore. He's CEO of Gemini Pharmaceuticals, and he's one of our customers. Leah Johnston is the Director of Dietary Supplements here at Trace Gains, and our colleague Brad Abetia is another account executive for Trace Gains. Both Leah and Brad work primarily on dietary supplements, natural products, and the CBD space. Let's jump into our topic. I'm going to go ahead and pass controls over to you guys. Leah, please take it away.
All right, thank you, and welcome to TGCon Live, everyone. This is a new forum for us, so thank you for bearing with us while we work through some of the technical challenges, but hopefully the content of the presentations that you're seeing and the community forum is actually really fun and engaging for you. As Dana said, my name is Leah. I work with Brad Abetia, and we lead dietary supplements sales here at Trace Gains. We're fortunate enough today to co-host a panel discussion with Larisa, who is a VP of Global Regulatory and Compliance at UNPA, and maybe a widely known fact, but a former FDA inspector. We also have Mike Finamore, who is one of my first customers at Trace Gains, and I'm really proud to be partnered with them. They are a world-class contract manufacturer there at Gemini Pharmaceuticals, and he's also the president of the GRMA, the Global Retailer Manufacturing Alliance. Did I say that right, Mike?
That's correct. I'm the governance board. Thank you. Same.
So we're really happy to have these veterans of the industry with us because they bring really important perspective when you look at what Larisa has in her background as an inspector, and then looking at her relationships with the partners they have at UNPA, and then Mike having a really unique position as a contract manufacturer leader, as well as working with retailers and brand manufacturers out there. So I think what we have to share today is actually going to be really, really interesting to you. What we're going to talk about this morning is, actually I guess afternoon where a lot of you are, the current state of affairs around the unprecedented consumer demand for dietary supplements and what that's doing to the supply chain in dietary supplements. Prior to COVID, the dietary supplement industry was experiencing pretty consistent growth and kind of an increasing reach and popularity. We were seeing more mainstream consumers actually crossing the chasm and engaging using supplements. Since the onset of COVID, sales have skyrocketed. And depending on where you look at the numbers, this year is expected to grow at a rate of 12.1%, which is the highest since 1997. So it's really awesome news for the industry. Sales are projected to surpass last year's number by over $10 billion. It's not a small number. And I remember joining the industry back in, I want to say 2005. We were under $4 billion total as an industry. It was tiny. So this is really awesome, although it is a challenge, right? As business leaders, we're looking at how do we deal with the bottleneck in supply chain that all of this proactive self-care is actually creating. We see consumers looking at self-care for their entire family, not just individuals, for depression, anxiety, sleep, immune health, weight loss, athletic performance, etc. So this isn't just a single product, right? We're looking at a really broad cross-section of products out there. And this demand is crushing the raw material supply chain. I'm on the phone every day with manufacturers and suppliers talking about this very issue, and certainly how we can support the business at TraceGains. But it's interesting to see where the struggle is and how real it is. So back in March, we actually had a joint webinar with UNPA, the president of UNPA, Lauren Israelson, where he sort of was projecting that he thought we would start seeing some critical raw material shortages this summer, some major challenges with getting raw materials brought in from overseas, and then looking at foreign supplier verification challenges. And we've seen all of that come true. So I don't think this is as a short-term issue as maybe we thought back then. And so we're looking to see what some of the industry experts think about this. So the other thing that's made this really interesting is regulatory enforcement has been almost non-existent, right? And then looking at all the different opinions on how to actually demonstrate best practices given all the new guidelines due to COVID, and making business work since we've been deemed part of the critical infrastructure. And think about that for a minute. So what is critical infrastructure? It's a term used by the government, I'm having to cheat and look at my notes here, to describe assets that are essential for the functioning of a society and economy. And I want to clap because that's dietary supplements doing that. We are part of that. That is awesome. So in our discussion today, we're going to talk about, with quality, safety, and consumer trust on the line, how can the industry survive supply chain disruption, capitalize on new opportunities, and increase that mainstream acceptance? So we're going to do a couple of things. First, we're going to do a Q&A session, or excuse me, we're going to do an introduction by both Larisa and Mike. And then we'll do a Q&A with them. Brad and I will lead that. And then we'll open it up to you guys out there in the audience to find out what you're interested in hearing about. So I guess without further ado, Larisa, if you don't mind, I'd love it for you to take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much to TraceGains and the staff there for inviting me and United Natural Products Alliance to participate in today's conference. I know it's unusual that we all get to work together virtually rather than face-to-face, and we all miss those interactions, but we're going to do our best to make this as engaging as possible. So United Natural Products Alliance, to introduce us as a group, we are a trade association, and trade associations have the role to help our membership to navigate through the regulatory challenges and the legal and legislative challenges that might be encountered in day-to-day business. So with United Natural Products Alliance, we have two senior political advisors that are located in Washington. Our main office is located in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is the epicenter of the dietary supplement world, with the largest concentration of dietary supplement companies in the country, if you use FDA registration numbers. And we provide regulatory quality support, legislative support, and then my role is to provide help with training and education and support to our membership to help them understand not only the FDA rules and regulations that are as they're being issued and the guidance documents that are coming out, but based on my experience, I had 12 years in industry in quality regulatory and product development. And then I shifted over to FDA, worked as an investigator for 8 years with them. And between those two types of, I guess, both sides of the fence, I'm able to help our membership to understand how to interpret the regulations and how to implement the regulations. So I say that we are not the largest trade association, but we are, my unofficial tagline is we are a collaboration of brilliant minds. We have 120 companies that are vetted memberships, and each of them has similar values and qualities. We all focus on the quality of the dietary supplements. We have science-based products, and we really focus on compliance for the members. I say that we're a family. We all enjoy each other's company. We collaborate, we bounce ideas off one another, and we help provide solutions to each of the members. You can see our website for some of the members within our group, and these represent some of the top brands in our industry.
Well, thank you for that. And Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great. Thank you very much, everyone. And I do appreciate everyone's time today. It's interesting, as Leah brought up, that I come at this from two different angles. The first is as a customer of Trace Gains through my company, Gemini Pharmaceuticals. And the second is a partner with Trace Gains through my involvement with the GRMA, the Global Retailer Manufacturer Alliance. So when this opportunity came up to speak to everyone, I thought it was quite interesting because the same reason I decided to become a customer of Trace Gains was basically the same reason that I thought an alignment with Trace Gains would be terrific for our GRMA membership. So just a little about Gemini Pharmaceuticals. We are a contract manufacturer of OTC drugs and dietary supplements based in New York. We've been in business for almost 40 years, and we manufacture products through all classes of trade and throughout the world for leading brands and others. And for us, the partnership that we're able to create with our customers, the ideation we can bring to the table is something which was a well-kept secret for a long time. But over the last few years, we've really allowed ourselves to come out of our shell and become more prominent within industry. And working with Trace Gains was a logical step for us because one of the challenges you face as a contract manufacturer when you're looking to bring ideas and partnerships to the table for your friends and partners is understanding the challenges of the supply chain. And the Trace Gain platform, from as it was marketed to us and as we've been able to demonstrate by using it on a daily basis, really has given us an ability to access a lot more information and have it pooled so there are other folks who are similarly situated who are actually helping confirm that information on a daily basis through the use of the system. So for us, for sourcing, for data management, for aggregation of information, it's been a fantastic tool. And frankly, I don't want to recommend it because it's a competitive advantage for us. But as one of the first customers in the dietary supplement space for Trace Gains, we're very proud members, and we'd like to think that we're going to be members for a long time. For the GRMA, the Global Retailer Manufacturers Alliance, this is a nonprofit organization which, in so many words, is a steward of the 455 ANSI standards, which are public standards which harmonize the regulations and best interests and best practices of industries to create GMP manufacturing standards for the cosmetic, OTC drug, and dietary supplement spaces. And without spending too much time on the value of a public standard as opposed to a private standard, we could all appreciate the fact that a public standard certainly represents the best of what society can offer in terms of a review by stakeholders and other members of the community who get together and decide that not only do they think the regulations serve a very strong purpose, but raising them to even a higher standard through logical attenuations to other pieces of either best practices or experiences in industry really will give the customers the best experience they could have, trusting what's in the market. And there's no more time that we should be concerned about that than right now. And that's why I believe this is a very timely discussion we're having today. So again, thank you for your time, and I hope we can help move the conversation along.
That was awesome, Mike. I really appreciate that. Let's move to some of the questions that we have for you guys today. I'm going to start off with Larisa. Larisa, what have you heard specific to the natural products when the FDA, we'll start these inspections again? Let's start off with that.
Well, FDA, like the rest of us, has been working from home base offices. In February is when we first started to hear announcements from the FDA regarding potential disruptions in inspections. So in February, they said they're going to discontinue inspections in China because that was the initial outbreak area and area of concern. And then in March, we heard that they would not only be postponing inspections in China, but they would expand that to all international inspections. And then closely followed in March, we also heard that they would postpone all of the domestic inspections. And at that time, the commissioner stated that they were going to use alternative approaches and alternative tools. They would be focusing on mission critical inspections. And when FDA speaks of mission critical, typically they're speaking of anything related to an outbreak or an emergency, any natural disaster. FDA spends a lot of time on floods or fires, anything that could disrupt the food supply, and any other public health emergencies. So kind of keep that in your mind when they talk about mission critical. And then most recently, in March, well, I guess it's not the most recent, but in March, they made another public announcement saying that at that time, all federal FDA employees would be working from home base unless they were lab employees or import employees. So there'll be some function still occurring. UNPA issued an announcement to our membership after the press release in July. And in July, the FDA said they're going to start resuming inspections. So that's good news. Hopefully all of the responsible companies are continuing to operate using good manufacturing practices. And I think in the dietary supplement industry, most companies really do have the best intentions to help customers and help members. Nobody wants to be in the middle of a PR crisis if you have a recall or an outbreak. So with the new FDA approaches, the FDA has basically announced that they'll be using a system. They're calling it a rating system for reopening. And they're going to be looking at geographical areas and the companies operating within those geographical areas. And they'll be evaluating each of those on a risk-based, they said risk-based activities. So from my prior experience with FDA, they're usually prioritizing companies based on the risk of the products or the risk of the manufacturing process, or has there been any outbreaks or emergencies related to those types of products, or what is the regulatory history of the companies within those areas? Obviously, companies that have been having some challenges with regulatory compliance are probably going to get moved up a little bit higher. One of the biggest differences that we're seeing with the inspections is that even domestic inspections, the FDA has announced that they're going to be pre-announced. So this is not something that FDA has ever done in the United States, except for some medical products which have pre-announced inspections. Typically, the international inspections were always pre-announced, and they would coordinate with those outside those companies overseas, but domestic inspections were always surprise. And typically you would just have an investigator arrive at your door, announce themselves to the most responsible party, and then they would begin the inspection. And now those pre-announced will be pretty interesting. The FDA staff, of course, will be using PPE, and they'll be following CDC guidances to protect not only themselves, but for the facilities that they'll be inspecting. And then, of course, mission critical came into the announcement in July as well, that they'll be focusing primarily on those mission critical facilities. One item to think about is there's been a lot of media, industry media, discussing documentation review and the potential for these alternate methods to include documentation review. But technically, there's really not authority by FDA to do inspection by document review, other than some of the new rules under FSMA. So the food safety, or excuse me, the foreign supplier verification programs does allow for that. So we'll see how these roll out. If any of your members or anyone listening has experienced those pre-announcements, if they could let us know, that would be great. Love to share that with the industry and with the memberships to help everyone to be prepared for those new approaches to inspection.
Perfect. And you kind of did talk to us a little bit about the on-site process, how it's going to change, different things that you see shifting as far as priority for foreign supplier verification program going forward. So let's we can move on to the next question here. One second. Let me, I heard we have a little bit of a lag, so I'm going to let the screen load, and then we'll go into that. As Leah explained a little bit earlier, we were talking with Lauren from UNPA, and he shared recently on the webinar that with TraceGains that he did with us, that he basically thought raw materials would begin to be depleted by the summer. So we're kind of curious, what are you seeing, what are you hearing, and how are your members dealing with the supply shortages, and more specifically, maybe it's certain dietary supplements. I know we've talked in the past about that. So if you could share on that, what you're hearing.
Yes, with raw material supply, I've again worked in the industry for almost 24 years. So I've had a lot of experience both on the business side and on the FDA side. And unfortunately, anytime you see an increase in demand, you will also see the potential for adulteration. There's always, I say that from my FDA experience, you have about 80% of the industry that really is there to help people and to help companies to manage help consumers to manage their own health. The challenge is, of course, you have about 10% of the audience in the supplement space, and actually in any space. So let's not call out our own supply chain, but in any industry, you have about 10% of the companies that just don't have any interest in compliance, and they're going to find a way to enter the market. So right now, it's really important that anyone working in the dietary supplement space, as Leah mentioned, the immune products were really the first to take off in February. We saw sales start skyrocketing. And then in March, all supplement sales went up. So initially it was those immune products. So we'll probably see the supply chain start diminishing or becoming a little bit harder for those immune style products. And we work very closely with the American Botanical Council and their program that's called the Botanicals Adulteration Prevention Program, which is an acronym of BAP, B-A-P-P. But they have been doing lots of work managing the supply chain and watching the supply chain to see what is happening in the supply chain and that potential for adulteration. And they have on their website 20 different bulletins of herbs and botanicals that have a likelihood of adulteration. And right now they're starting to see, just as everyone has kind of forecasted and predicted, that we have an increase in adulteration for elderberry products, because that was kind of, the big boom. Everyone heard that elderberry was working very well for immune support. And with this new world that we live in and the COVID infections, people really wanted to be aware of their health and their immune support. So watching for that, and I think you'll start seeing that trickle down into a lot of other categories. Botanicals seem to be the one that has the highest incident of adulteration, and FDA watches and manages that pretty closely as well. With the reduced presence of the FDA, that's kind of another area that we kind of have to think about when we're talking about the supply chain, is really having vigilance. I took a quote from the American Botanical Council, but they said buyers should be vigilant. And that's true in any circumstance, but especially now when we have to understand if you're finding elderberry for a cheaper price or at a different quality, you need to be aware of that. And with our membership, we're seeing that they're starting to work very closely with their supply chain. Many of the companies within our membership have received training from UNPA and from others on what is the new expectation under FDA FSMA, or the Food Modernization Act, is what is the responsibility of the companies to do supply chain management. And under 21 CFR Part 117, Subpart G is all about supply chain programs. And I would encourage any company out there to really spend some time understanding that section of the rule for the Preventive Controls Rule for Human Food, because it really outlines the FDA's modern approach to supply chain management. And if you combine that with other resources available, like the Botanicals Adulteration Prevention programs, you really have to just be aware of what's happening in the supply chain, either through industry media or through your own resources, is just being vigilant, getting the training. A lot of companies that we're working within the membership have pre-negotiated contracts. They have strong standing relationships with their suppliers. But I think really the most important piece to outline is your relationship with labs and independent laboratories. Two of our members, Alchemist and Eurofins, really do stand out as top quality labs that you can trust, that have methods that are specific to the products that are being tested. And you really just have to be conscious and aware and develop those relationships with some of those trusted third parties.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that. Let's see here. We have our last question. We've got a couple questions here. Obviously, we know that training is a benefit for UNPA and the members. And you have had to rely on, understanding new requirements, different things like that. With COVID, how is training priority shifted due to what we're dealing with today?
Yeah, training is shifting. Just as all of us have learned how to work remotely, how to work via Zoom, how to attend all of these great conferences that are being put on electronically and virtually, we also are shifting our training programs to virtual. And I am a lead instructor for the Food Safety Preventative Controls Alliance. And this is an organization that was developed through grant funding from the FDA. They have established and developed the standardized curriculum that's mentioned in the Preventive Controls Rule for Human Food. So the standardized curriculum was always taught face-to-face. And now with this new life that we're living in, this new virtual world that we're existing in, is they have finally allowed us to start training virtually. So our first training course will be in October. But the training for Preventive Controls Rule for Human Food is now 2 parts. And part one is a pre-recorded modules that you attendees would listen to. They have 6 months to complete those modules. It's 16 different chapters in the standardized curriculum. The course that we'll be offering in October is part 2. And in part 2, attendees will have the benefit of instructor-led virtual training. So we would be doing it just as we are here today, where everyone would be online and virtual, and we would be working on a high-level overview of the material in the curriculum, and then it would be a skills assessment. So upon successful completion of all of those curriculum hours, attendees would be receiving a certificate, and that would classify them as a preventive controls qualified individual. So that online training, we'll try to do it in smaller sessions to prevent Zoom fatigue, but it would be 8 hours in part 2. And depending on skill level, part 1 takes between 6 to 12 hours, depending on the skill level of those participants.
Awesome, awesome. And it's, just like we're seeing participation for TGCon, we were able to open it up. We didn't have to, people don't have to fly in. And I think we have over 1,000 participants during this week. So have you seen a change yourself in the participation?
Yes, we are seeing within the UNPA membership, we're holding many, we've always had a lot of outreach to keep members informed, whether it's member memos, emails, webinars. We're doing a lot of virtual meetings. So we are seeing a lot more participation. And as you've noted, we have virtual conferences and opportunities for virtual learning from many different sources. Every week, it seems to be growing, where you almost feel a little bit more connected than you were before. There were so many limitations with our travel schedules that you couldn't always be in 2 places at once. Well, now you can attend 3 conferences in 1 week from the comfort of your living room.
Right,
So
exactly.
We are seeing a change.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do want to remind everybody that you can ask questions as we're going through this. We do have a little chat box that you can send us, and what we'll do is when we get to the end, we'll answer some of those questions if we have time. So now what I want to do is I want to shift over to Mike. I'm going to allow Leah to kind of take control, and you guys take it away.
All right. Well, Larisa, thanks first off just for all of your wonderful insights and your approach. We love the leadership that you provide the industry, and certainly the way that you approach challenges and making sure that we're all armed with the right info and providing resources for us. So thank you very much for that. And on to Mike, and thank you again, Mike, for joining us. I know that this is an incredibly busy time for you at Gemini as well as at GRMA. So along those lines, do you agree that the demand to innovate at a faster rate due to raw material shortages is becoming a priority? And how are you seeing manufacturers, yourself being one of those, respond to the increased challenges?
Certainly. Well, thank you for that. We've definitely seen these issues that Larisa brought up coming to light, and this really wouldn't be a surprise to anybody in our space, especially when you look at some of the foundational ingredients we use, where there are very limited sources to purchase these from. Even with the best relationships, there is a finite supply of these things, and a lot of that has to do with market demand. When the price does go up, people do come into the market, and when price goes down, some people do have to leave the market on ingredients. But we've seen a couple of changes. And I think the most interesting one was how, in my space, making for the customers we do, we usually have an 8 or 10 month window in which to design products, get everything figured out for them, work with the brand, understand what they're looking for, lock down the supply chain, testing, and everything in between, and then produce the product based on an advertising plan or marketing plan. Well, this year, as we all know, that got thrown away in about 45 minutes once COVID popped up, and we saw the market revert to the traditional vitamins and nutritional supplements that one would take for an immunity response or a cough and cold season. And that really has not abated. And I think that's why we've seen a really interesting dynamic between an increased demand of these staple items and some unique opportunities as well for some new stuff. But a lot of the marketing which these brands were presenting for this coming year in a normal environment and normal economy really has been somewhat shaken. So along those lines, for Gemini and manufacturers like myself, we've been working with a lot of virtual audits. And this helps us understand, since we can't be on site in many cases, we can still have that familiarity with the manufacturer or supplier we're dealing with. And that also goes upstream as well, where our customers are able to speak with us and perhaps get that comfort level that they would ordinarily have by being on site and poking around. They now could do the same thing from the safety of their homes. And that's really, I think, one of the major changes our community is going to face in the future. And there are a ton of positives, but there are also a ton of places to be careful when relying on virtual audits. And from the GRMA perspective, it's something which we're putting out some information on, because a lot of our stakeholder members at the retailer understand the value of that. And they can't go a year without having an audit done of their key vendors. So for them to understand the value of a virtual audit, be able to get the information they need, understand that the audit does touch all the key parts they would look for if they were there in person, or if their chosen auditing body was there in person. It's something that I think has really pushed this industry forward a little bit quicker than we were prepared to in many cases. But I think ultimately it's going to be a tremendous benefit for not only our industry, but also for the consumer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent.
Right on. So you did talk a little bit about the supply chain. So we want to kind of know what, we know that the supply chain has challenges with sourcing, right? So what are your members or the members doing to find new suppliers?
Well, it's funny how in this economy, the market is helping us do that. As I mentioned earlier, there may have been a raw material which had 3 or 4 key suppliers in the world from an API or even a dietary supplement perspective. Since the demand for that's gone up, all of a sudden, maybe these industries or these companies that it wasn't economically viable for them to make that product are now able to get back in that space. But as Larisa mentioned earlier, that is a bit of a problem sometimes, because those companies may not have been making that product for very long, or their systems may not be as robust, or there may be some contaminants in the product, or things that you need to be careful of that perhaps even the best intended raw material supplier didn't contemplate when they originally created this product in the past. On the herbal side, it's becoming even more of a concern. There is the adulteration issue. We do know there's only a finite amount of certain herbs and plants around, and you see in the marketplace how there is X times that available in one form or another. So that should just give the industry and society a large pause over what they're doing. And while I hate to say to rely on established brands and established products, in many cases, especially if you're looking for items which may be adulterated, a key component to that is understanding that the brand you're working with and the manufacturer that will provide product for that brand does have a robust supply chain, does have the relationships, does have the quality GMPs in place that can not only ferret out problematic vendors, but if there's a latent problem with the item that can be detected somewhere along the way, that they have the systems to catch it and make sure that it never gets to market.
Right on, right on. So you need to talk a little bit about your sources, but I'm curious, are you seeing any increase in alterated or adulterated products?
You know, we've seen it's been, the growth of the industry has allowed other folks to come in the space over the last few years. And frankly, the spread of technology through laboratories like some that Larisa mentioned and others in the market, along with the understanding that manufacturers like myself should have a certain level of technical expertise at their location. This was kind of promulgated by the regulations of 111, forcing us in the dietary supplement space to become more partners with our customers than a transactional relationship. So when you do have that expectation that the manufacturers and the purchasers are supposed to have a higher level of understanding of what they're buying, even in a growth economy when maybe less people with less standards would try to get into space, we're catching more stuff. And in an economy right now, in a market in our space, which is blowing up, we're going to absolutely see that. But the key, as we said earlier, is rely with trusted vendors, make sure you have a very robust program to not only audit the vendor, but also the product, and understand what you're buying. And the best price out there should give you something to look at. Also, an expensive price should make you look at something, but creating those product specifications, understanding what they mean, and being able to truly vet the materials you're buying, that's the key to everything, both in this economy and in time to come.
Awesome. Great. That's great info. All right. Let's see here. Next question.
All right. So this is one that's really interesting to me because we know that building trust is really paramount with consumers now that they're relying more on OTCs, specifically around dietary supplements, which is what we're interested in talking about here today. And we're seeing this huge boom in sales related to COVID, but we know the pandemic is what shot a huge breath of life into this, right? So now that consumers are seeing the benefit, right, it's become more of a part of day-to-day life. Is this here to stay? Do you think this has got some sticking power, staying power? Is this a fad? I'd love to get your input and thoughts on that.
Well, I think there's something to be said for that. We did see a burst off the bat, and I think that's just because the nature of the issue we're having. But my personal belief and what you see in the marketplace is that while we definitely are waiting for a vaccine to fix this and other things, therapeutics are going to be the key to getting us back to a normal life, even in the age of a vaccine. And dietary supplements and even OTC drugs, my company straddles both worlds, do offer that opportunity. So I do believe that while we all know how nutrition's become a bigger part of our life over the last decade or even 15 years, not dating myself, but growing up, you knew in your kitchen cabinet, maybe you had a Flintstones and, who knows, maybe a vitamin C. And now everyone has got a fish oil and CoQ and multivitamins and different things. So that was accelerating anyway. And then when you add this to it, I think this greater awareness has really broadened that market. And we've also seen from the GRMA perspective, and even some of our customers in the retail space, how the power of their private brand is really taking off in this economy. And these products, dietary supplements, are a very big part of these retailers' offerings. And so by having this, the COVID issue, along with the emphasis on retailer brands, I really think that the promotion of these products is going to continue. And I think the growth is here to stay.
That's awesome. I am right in line with you. I believe that as well. So Brad, I think we have one more question and then we're going to open it up for questions.
Yep. Let's see here. All right, Mike, last question for you. We know that safety, quality, and trust matter across the board from concept to consumption. Talk to us about how GRMA is part of this solution.
Right. Well, the GRMA was created in 2014 when a series of industry stakeholders, retailers, manufacturers, and regulators, CB, certification bodies, public health officials got together and realized that while we all were subjecting ourselves to audits on a daily basis, that we really weren't getting down to the level of granularity and confidence that everyone needed to be sure that we were all manufacturing our products to the highest standards. And so through a process shepherded by NSF, the GRMA was created as a nonprofit organization where the 455 standards were created and published last year. And the GRMA is in charge of the audit scheme, basically. So the GRMA offers its membership, who consists of major retailers and manufacturers throughout the country, an opportunity to have a single platform where auditors are trained to these standards, which include FSMA, the 117 that Larisa brought up earlier, which our membership believes represent the highest standard in GMP manufacturing expectations for dietary supplements, OTC drugs, and cosmetics. And the organization is expanding into areas of interest beyond that. Don't want to market the GRMA. That's not what we're here for today. But ultimately, the focus on quality throughout the supply chain is something which is of great interest to all of us, and especially the retailers, who, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, have their name on the product that they're selling. And people, as we're all aware, put a great deal of trust in the brand they purchase. So having that uncompromised is a super important thing to them. So from a manufacturing perspective, having a fantastic audit where you only need one audit done by a certification body, which will satisfy an entire industry to show of your bona fides. And from a retailer perspective, having that singular audit available on a website, basically, where you can sign in and review the audit down to very great detail, understand the training of the auditor to make sure there's not something different between two organizations or two individual auditors. It offers a tremendous opportunity for everyone to basically raise the quality standards across the industry. So this is something which COVID has really accelerated the interest in, because these retailers are looking for suppliers around the world to help them with the influx of demand and challenges both domestically and overseas through interruptions where facilities have been slowed down, transportation has been slowed down. This is an excellent opportunity for industry to once again focus themselves on GMPs and realize the quality of the product that they're putting together needs to be of the highest standard in order to make sure the customer gets the best product they can.
Right on, right on. And that kind of leads us to where we're at here. Oops, I think here, let me go back here, where TraceGains is at, right? Because we talk about safety, we talk about quality, we talk about trust, but the other part of it, we're talking about the technology part of it. How do we protect everyone out there all under one platform? And that's what TraceGains is really designed to do. Mike, you talked about limited sources. We've talked about adulterations. But we really talked about is how are we finding suppliers? You know, with COVID, we can't really travel like we used to. So our platform allows you to go out and search our market hub to find new ingredients for suppliers. As the market changes, you know, the different research that you can do across our platform, we provide operability and we break down those barriers not only internally but also out to suppliers. Because we've built a network with over 30,000 suppliers, you can go in and look at the paperwork. You can request samples off our system. We also have, especially for the dietary supplement industry, we have a claims management solution where you can look at over 300,000 structure function claims. So as you're starting to go through this, our system really is geared up to that you don't have to travel. You can use technology to leverage these type of things. And that once you've started to collect and you picked a vendor, you know, there's those type of things where you had to do those audits, maybe, you know, desk audits or, you know, virtual audits or different things like that. With our system, as we're collecting, we're helping you collect, manage, create those relationships over our network digitally, the operability that allows you to basically open up for you. Now you can start to approve suppliers faster, onboard suppliers faster, know exactly the items that you have, because we take the technology side of it to look into the insight of the data that you actually have. And so once you have the data, you have all the information that you need all under one platform, where we've seen, you know, companies where they've had 4 systems. and they're combined into one super system, and that's where we come into play. But we also have capabilities to be able to tap into your ERPs. And the idea behind it really is leveraging the technology so that you can break down these barriers. We know that you can't travel right now. We know that you can't do these things. We're working virtually. But how can we provide you, TraceGains, a platform that you can do that? And that's exactly what our system does. So as you approve and gather this data, you can actually virtually start creating specifications with workflows, know exactly where it's at. And the other part that was really interesting as we go forward, Mike, you've mentioned it, Larisa, you kind of mentioned it, about adulterations. We also, on our platform, because we understand that who the suppliers you're dealing with, the items that you're dealing with, we're looking at those different things, the alerts from the FDAs, the warnings, the advisories, all those type of things. So now TraceGains platform is being more proactive than reactive. So, you know, everything that you guys talked about today was fabulous information. All our guests and everybody that are here today, if you want to learn more about our platform, you have questions, please reach out, because this is how TraceGains is solving these problems that we're dealing with today. We're in a perfect position to help you because of the travel and the different restrictions that you have to kind of get you organized going forward. So with that, we're going to move to some closing remarks. We do have some questions. If you have any questions, now would be a good time to put them out, and we'll try to answer those for you. I'll turn it over to Leah.
We are out of time, so I'm going to invite our panelists to, there was one audience question about vertical integration and whether that was something that you could see our industry moving towards to solve the raw materials shortages. I'm going to invite our panelists to go into the chat and to chat back to that person who asked that question. And I just want to thank everyone for participating today.
Yes, thank you very much, Mike and Larisa. You're wonderful for joining, shared some really great insights, and thanks, TraceGains team.
Thank you. You guys did great.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great day.